and going to be playing meaningful football deep into November, even on. And that's a change, and that's a big change. And you know, one of the things we talked about last week is everyone should enjoy it. And, you know, there's still that undercurrent of, you know, Johnny Manziel, and we talked a little bit about that last week. Even though the starting quarterback was 5-3, now he's 6-3. You know, it's time to step back and enjoy it, and say, this is pretty fun. This is what football's about. You want to play meaningful games deep into the season. They're going to have an opportunity to do so in at least the next few weeks.
You mentioned Manziel, you mentioned Hoyer there. Let's talk about that for a second, because I answered a question in the last segment right before I brought you on here. Somebody asked what I thought the Browns were going to do as far as Hoyer and his contract and all of that, and I said it, and I'll ask you. I truly believe, forget what they say to the media, forget what the media wants to happen. I truly believe that the Browns feel that they have identified their quarterback for the next few seasons. I'm not saying for the future, but I believe that they not only like what they've got in Brian Hoyer for the next 7 games, but for the next couple of seasons. Now, clearly you can say Manziel. I still look back to the fact that they didn't know exactly where this thing was going to go with Hoyer, so they had no choice but to attack the position the way they did. But I think, and I could be wrong, people could, hey, look, the day after the season, they could give Brian Hoyer a pat on the tail and give Johnny his locker. But I don't believe that. I think that Ray Farmer and Mike Pettine have identified him as being their guy for a couple of seasons, assuming, of course, that they can financially make it happen. But I do believe. I don't believe the Browns' thought process right now as far as the future. And I know Pettine, he has to look at game to game. Ray Farmer's the one looking ahead. But I don't believe right now he's looking ahead and going, yeah, man, can't wait to plug Johnny in there. My gut tells me that they look at Johnny as a luxury right now, because I believe they've identified Hoyer as more than good enough to handle the job for the next few seasons.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I don't want to play revisionist history. As you know, I've said from the start of this whole issue is that if you take a quarterback in the first round of the NFL draft, your plan is to move forward with that particular quarterback, and that was their plan. But I give them credit for not being so just as I said, scheme-wise with particular coaches, not being so hard-headed, not being so, just all hell-bent on that's the plan and that's the way we're going to go no matter what. So I give them credit for, and I've often compared it to what happened here in Philadelphia last year with Nick Foles. As I said, Chip Kelly had no intention of playing Nick Foles, didn't want to play Nick Foles. When he got his opportunity, he played so well he won the job. That was always the chance that Brian Hoyer had. He seized control of the job, and now it's his job. On the other hand, again, look back to the Eagles now. Nick Foles got hurt. Mark Sanchez goes in. It's now Mark Sanchez has the same opportunity Nick Foles had last year, had the same opportunity as Brian Hoyer currently has. If you play well in the National Football League and you win and you take a team, especially like the Browns, to somewhere they haven't been in so long, no one's taking that job away from you. It's just not going to happen. And at the same time, if there's an injury, if something happens in that realm, and Johnny Manziel gets an opportunity to play and plays lights out, nobody's taking the football away from him. So I think it's all about the fact that Brian Hoyer has taken advantage of an opportunity that, in essence, Johnny Manziel gave him with his lack of work ethic in the offseason.
Right, and you and I have talked about that, but I mean, assuming, now of course this conversation assumes that there's not going to be some incredible drop-off down the stretch, which I don't believe you'll see, but you never know what you may see. But yeah, regardless, I still think that the only thing that prevents Brian Hoyer from coming back for the next, I'd say, 2 seasons with this team would be an overly overly priced paycheck, obviously, if he was going for the super, super big payday. But then again, he also doesn't come across as that guy, although I will give him a touche. Did you notice after the Thursday night game, which you and I hadn't even had a chance to talk since that game, did you notice, and clearly this was an order from his agent, when he was asked in the post-game show specifically about the hometown hero story, and he goes, he didn't even acknowledge it. Instead, his answer was, hey, man, I just want to be a starter in the NFL, whatever that is, man. I just want to be a starter somewhere. And he played that card perfectly, because he knows that the more you say, I love the Browns and I've always wanted to be here, the more he loves the Browns. More than that, I want to be a starter in the NFL.
Yeah, that's the one issue I have concern over, is the fact that I think the mentality amongst the front office in Cleveland is that they'll get the hometown discounts.
Yep.
And that's a very dangerous opinion to have, because at the end of the day, I'm sure he would rather play with Cleveland, the team that gave him his opportunity, and obviously his hometown. But you just mentioned it. I mean, this is a business, and this is a guy who's coming off a torn ACL and hasn't had a big payday. And there is a short shelf life amongst all NFL players, and the goal beyond on a personal level, beyond, we're not talking about a team goal or anything but the goal for any NFL player is to take care of their family and set themselves up for the future, because it's not a very long career in the NFL, even for guys who are successful for a very long time. It's still, when you think about life as a whole, even people that have been in the game for almost 2 decades, you're still 40 years old when you retire, and you got the rest of your life to live. So it's a short shelf life, and people want to get paid. And I think it's a very dangerous opinion to take when you look at all the NFL teams that need quarterbacks. If you're going to go out and let him be a free agent, even if you stick the franchise tag on him for a year or the transition tag, there might be another team coming in with a poison pill, with a big money contract,
right.
with a lot of money up front. So they have to, be very wary of that type of situation, especially if things continue as they're going, and say the Cleveland Browns turn into the AFC North champion. The money aspect of it for Brian Hoyer is just going to keep going up, if that's the end game.
Let me ask you your thoughts. I saw this. I saw this posed by a couple of different people in the last week or so, and really it makes a lot of sense. The Andy Dalton example for a contract, and I know some people that don't understand. They think Andy Dalton's making $115 million. He's not. Andy Dalton's making like $22 million, and the rest of it is, if you're a franchise quarterback, we can keep this thing going. But basically, it's a long-term contract with a lot of money built up front, like I said, about $20-some million, and basically 2 years before they've got to decide, is this truly our guy or not, and invest more into that. So something similar to that I could see being amenable to Brian Hoyer. He doesn't need to make $100 million, but I think you do got to guarantee him $10 million or so a year for the next 2 years. Let him know that he's got a chance to keep the job as long as he plays, but if he doesn't, then we're going to go forward with plan B.
Yeah, and I think that's you're right. I mean, Andy Dalton, Colin Kaepernick too, very team-friendly contracts, and people do see that guaranteed money, and they jump to conclusions. It's really very, very team-friendly contracts, and each team can move on easily if things go in a bad direction. And the Browns, though, from all indications, want something far less than that, and obviously they don't want to be locked into that long-term thing, and have talked about a 2-year deal mostly, and that's where the pedigree comes into it. And even though it's not fair, the fact that Brian Hoyer was regarded as a journeyman continues to hurt him when it comes to contract negotiations.
Because he's not.
Because
right? I mean, he's
people,
not a journeyman.
look at it and say, 2 years, $9 million, whatever. If you look at what starting quarterbacks in this league make, that would still be a bargain.
Right, that's backup
even
money.
if you went up to 10, 11 million per year, still a bargain. And the fact that, I think that right now, Brian Hoyer's smart to not accept a contract like that because, he's in essence betting on himself. And I understand, Carson Palmer, you just saw him go down with another torn ACL, and that can happen to any quarterback at any time. And that's the downside of what he's doing.
Yes.
And so far he's winning. And if this continues, there's no way the Browns are getting him for, say, 2 years and $20 million. It's just not happening.
I hear you, man. Definitely, and that's the interesting part of the game here as it continues to play out all with every W. Speaking of Houston coming up, that's an interesting scenario because I'm looking at it and I know they got J.J. Watt and I know that they've got Arian Foster potentially going to play. I'm assuming he'll be healthy, but they got the new quarterback in there, a guy who's never a fired up hometown crowd, and I'm not all that afraid of some things on Houston. What do you think, man? Can the Browns go to 7-3 here to start the season, or do you think Houston comes to Cleveland and grabs one?
Well, we just talked about anytime you're playing against J.J. Watt, you should be scared. He's so by far the best defender at this stage of the game. He's very but there's not a ton of talent around him in Houston as a whole. And you mentioned they're making the shift to Ryan Mallett at quarterback. And Tom Brady's probably going to be in Indianapolis somewhere getting ready for his game, acting like a proud papa. When you think about, Ryan Mallett starting for the Texans and Brian Hoyer starting for the Browns.
You know it. Yep.
And it's Houston's a dangerous team, and we talk about it all the time in the NFL. There's no, and the fact that you mentioned Arian Foster, Andre Johnson still playing at a high level, DeAndre Hopkins. They do have some talent, but, it all starts at the quarterback position. And the fact that they made the move this week from Ryan Fitzpatrick to Ryan Mallett, I think is certainly going to help Cleveland simply because, it should take a while for him to get acclimated into that starting job. He's obviously not going to have that immediate rapport with his receivers and such. And there are times when you're going to look extremely bad trying to block J.J. Watt, and that's going to happen. And people in Cleveland should, right now, they should accept that and realize it's going to happen. You want to keep it. You want to keep the game-changing plays away from J.J. Watt. You can't let him bat down that ball. You can't let him pick it off. You can't let him cause that. There's going to be 2 sacks. There's going to be a number of disruptions in the backfield. You can live with that. You just can't let him make the game-changing plays that could give Houston the momentum.
Absolutely. That's going to be the key there. I do expect, I said it, this is the first time since they came back. You hadn't told me, by the way, your thoughts of what the Browns did in Cincinnati real quick before we let you go.
Well, it's their best game of the year. I mean, I by far. I look at that game, and there's not too many players on the Browns that were in the red, so to speak, and had less than stellar games. Everybody was at least doing their job or doing above what they're supposed to do. It was, as close to a complete game as I've seen in the NFL this year from both phases, the offense and defense, basically completely dominated. And we talked about it before. It was just, unexpected. The fact that they go into that game with a 17-game road losing streak in the division, and on the other hand, Cincinnati's 13-0-1 at home. over their past 14. So it was unexpected.